30,000 feet in the air. The captain's voice broke the silence. Any combat pilots on board? Passengers froze. Fear spread. And in row 12, a quiet woman knew the call was meant for her. What happened next would decide the fate of everyone on that plane. The airport glowed with restless energy. Screens flashed with departures and arrivals. Voices echoed through the halls, and travelers hurried with bags tugging at their arms. Among the crowds was a woman who did not stand out. She wore a plain jacket, jeans that had faded with time, and shoes that looked more functional than stylish. Her hair was tied back loosely, not with care, but with the simple habit of someone who did not need to impress. She moved quietly, as if she had long practiced the art of going unnoticed. At gate 47, passengers lined up for boarding, families with children, business travelers with sharp suits, and young couples holding hands all shuffled forward in the slow rhythm of departure. She stepped into line without hurry, holding only a small carry-on bag. No one gave her a second glance. To the world, she was only another traveler among hundreds. When she entered the aircraft, the familiar scent of recycled air and coffee greeted her. The cabin lights shone soft and steady, reflecting off the narrow aisle. Flight attendants smiled as they guided passengers to their seats. She nodded politely, but her eyes avoided lingering on anyone for too long. Her ticket showed row 12, seat A, a window seat on the left side of the plane. Sliding into her spot, she placed her bag beneath the seat ahead. She folded her jacket loosely over her lap, then leaned back. From her window, she could see the wing, stretching far into the distance, silver against the evening sky. Engines hummed softly as ground crews prepared the jet for its journey across the ocean. All around her, the cabin filled with sound. A toddler laughed as he slapped his hands on the armrest. A businessman muttered into his phone about contracts and deadlines. A pair of teenagers argued over music choices, sharing one set of earbuds. For most, this flight was just another step between places New York to London, a trip that blended into the rhythm of modern life. She closed her eyes briefly. To the casual observer, she seemed to be resting, but in truth, she was listening. The sounds of the cabin layered in her mind, the clicks of overhead bins, the shuffle of luggage wheels, the call of attendants. She noticed details without effort, a habit she had never unlearned. When the announcement came, the cabin grew quiet. The captain's voice was calm, professional, rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard. We expect a smooth flight tonight, with clear skies for most of our journey. Flight time will be just over 7 hours. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride." Passengers smiled, some already buckling seatbelts tighter, others sighing with relief. For them, flying was routine. For her, it was not. Every takeoff reminded her of what she had once left behind. The plane pushed back from the gate. Lights along the runway glittered like a necklace against the darkening sky. Engines roared louder, vibrations running through the floor, and the jet surged forward. She felt the familiar lift in her stomach as the wheels left the ground. Clouds swallowed the view as the city fell away, its lights fading into a blur below. She let her head rest against the window. To anyone watching, she looked like a tired traveler, closing her eyes for a nap. But behind those closed eyes was a different world. Memories of roaring engines, swift climbs, and sharp dives haunted the quiet space inside her mind. She had once known the sky as a battlefield, not a highway. She had once worn a uniform, not jeans. Yet tonight, she told herself again, she was only a passenger. She sat quietly, almost blending into the shadows of the cabin. The businessman beside her barely noticed her, too busy typing notes on his laptop. Across the aisle, a grandmother unwrapped a sandwich she had packed from home. A couple 2 rows back whispered as they scrolled through vacation photos. Everyone had their own story, their own reason for being here. No one asked about hers. She liked it that way. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than answers. People always grew curious when she revealed too much. They asked about the scars on her hands, about the look in her eyes that seemed to see farther than the horizon. So she stopped explaining. She told people she was an engineer. It was not a lie, but it was not the whole truth. Years earlier, she had lived another life, one filled with noise and danger, with roaring engines that shook her bones, with missions that demanded split-second decisions. She had flown machines that cut through the sky at impossible speeds. She had trained for war, not peace, and she had survived. But survival had a price. The faces of comrades lost, the endless nights where sleep refused to come, the weight of choices that could never be undone, all of it stayed with her. When she left that life, she promised herself she would not go back. She promised herself she would live quietly, anonymously, away from the storm. Now she worked with blueprints and designs, her hands on paper and screens instead of throttles and controls. She built machines instead of flying them. She taught younger engineers how to imagine what might one day take flight. But inside, she still carried the instincts of a pilot. She could not unlearn how to measure distances with her eyes, how to listen for the tone of an engine, how to read the sky like a book. In row 12, she looked like an ordinary traveler, a woman alone, wearing worn clothes, resting against the window. No one would imagine that she had once carried lives on her shoulders, that she had once touched the edge of death and returned. Her eyes opened briefly. The cabin was dim now, lights lowered to let passengers drift into rest. The hum of engines surrounded her, steady and constant. It should have been comforting. Yet to her, it was never just noise. It was a reminder of control or the lack of it. She was used to being in command, used to trusting her own hands. Sitting here as a passenger was the hardest part. She shifted slightly, pulling her jacket tighter. She told herself again, this was just a flight, nothing more. But fate, she knew, had a way of ignoring promises. The cockpit had been calm. The captain and co-pilot worked in practiced harmony, adjusting dials, checking instruments, speaking in short-clipped phrases. The flight seemed routine, steady across the Atlantic night. Then it changed in a moment. The co-pilot's face lost color. His hand slipped from the throttle. His voice caught in a half-finished word. His eyes rolled back, unfocused. He gasped once, then slumped sideways. The captain reacted instantly. "Mike," he barked, grabbing his shoulder. No response. The man's chest rose once, shallow, then faltered. His body went limp. Panic clawed at the edges of the captain's mind, but years of training held him steady. He reached for the radio, his voice sharp. Medical emergency in the cockpit. Now, the reinforced door buzzed open, and attendants rushed in. They pulled the co-pilot to the floor, working desperately oxygen mask, chest compressions, defibrillator pads. The cramped space echoed with urgent voices, with the hiss of equipment, with the beeping of failing monitors. But nothing worked. The man lay still. The captain's knuckles whitened as he gripped the controls, alone, over the Atlantic. Hundreds of lives behind him, hours still to go. Flying solo was possible, but dangerous. Exhaustion, turbulence, a single mistake could end them all. His voice cracked over the radio. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight 217. First officer incapacitated. I am the only pilot remaining." Air traffic control responded, professional but alarmed. "Flight 217, Roger. Emergency services alerted. Can you continue solo?" "I'll try," he muttered. But even as he said it, doubt pressed hard against his chest. Minutes later, he made the call he never thought he would. His voice carried through the intercom, trembling with urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there are any trained combat pilots on board, please make yourself known to the crew immediately." At first, no one reacted. The intercom crackled, the words hanging heavy in the air. Most passengers blinked in confusion, thinking they had Misheard. Combat pilots. On a commercial flight. Whispers spread like sparks. What did he say? Did he mean pilot? Why combat? A mother clutched her child closer. A man near the exit shook his head, muttering that it had to be a mistake. An elderly woman pulled out her rosary beads, lips moving in frantic prayer. The businessman beside her frowned. This doesn't sound good at all, he whispered. His voice tight. Flight attendants moved quickly through the aisles, trying to stay calm, but their eyes betrayed urgency. One reassured a frightened child, though her hands trembled. Another whispered into her intercom, scanning the rows with searching eyes. The atmosphere of the plane shifted sharply. Minutes before, it had been serene. Now it bristled with tension. Fear hummed beneath every breath. She opened her eyes. Her heart pounded as the captain's words echoed in her head. Combat pilot. She knew that tone. She had heard it in war zones, in emergencies, in moments when survival balanced on a knife's edge. Memories rushed back. Dawn on an airfield. The smell of jet fuel, the vibration of engines ready to launch. She had left it all behind. She had promised never to return. But the silence stretched too long. No one stood. No one moved. The captain repeated his plea. If there are any military or combat pilots on board, press your call button immediately. She exhaled slowly, her jaw tightening. She knew the moment was coming, and she knew the call was meant for her.